"Show me your body," Mountain Man demanded from the fat girl, but his real intention left her speechless. "Show me your body." The words hit Esther Essie Hartwell like a slap. For a moment she thought the stranger was mocking her, another cruel man eager to shame the fat girl everyone in Timber Creek whispered about. The heat of the Wyoming summer beat down on her heavy dress, but she still clutched the long sleeves tight against her skin. Beneath the fabric, her body burned and itched. Covered in angry red patches she dared not reveal to anyone. She'd begged the town doctor for help. He'd laughed, turned her away, and told his assistant loud enough for the street to hear, "I don't treat filthy animals." The townsfolk snickered, pretending to look away as she stumbled out of the clinic in tears. That night, as thunder rolled over the hills, she made her choice. She would rather die trying to find the man in the mountains, the one people called the ghost doctor, than rot away in shame. It took 2 days of walking, her legs raw and swollen, before she found the small cabin hidden beneath a stand of pines. The man who opened the door was nothing like she imagined. Tall, broad-shouldered, a beard dusted with silver. His eyes, a piercing blue, cold but tired, looked straight through her excuses. "I heard you help people no one else will," she said, her voice trembling. "I help the sick," he replied flatly. "If that's truly what you are, show me your body." Essie froze, her face burning with humiliation. She thought he was cruel, until she saw the glint of compassion behind his steady gaze. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? Because this story, one of shame, healing, and unexpected love, begins right here on Copper Mountain. Esther Essie Hartwell had long ago learned to shrink herself, not her body. God knew that was impossible, but her presence. Her voice was soft, her steps careful, her eyes always downcast. In Timber Creek, people didn't see her as a woman. They saw a spectacle. The butcher's overweight daughter, who wore gloves in summer and buttoned every inch of her body as though hiding a crime. If anyone asked why she dressed that way, she would laugh nervously and say she burned easily in the sun. The truth was uglier. Beneath those layers, her skin was a battlefield, red, inflamed, and cracked from a disease she couldn't name. It itched until she bled. Each morning she woke to bloodstains on her sheets and the dull ache of shame. When she begged Dr. Melrose, the only physician in town, for help, he barely looked at her. "You've brought this on yourself," he said coldly. "Maybe wash more and lose some weight." The laughter that followed her out of the clinic stayed longer than the pain. That night, sitting behind her small rented room, she overheard 2 women gossiping near the well. "Did you hear? The fat girl's fallen apart." Serves her right. God punishes gluttony. By dawn, something inside Essie broke. She packed her few belongings, a shawl, a loaf of bread, and her late mother's Bible, and started walking toward the mountains. She'd heard rumors about a man who lived there, a recluse, a former army doctor who refused to treat townsfolk but sometimes helped those who found him. They called him Mad Josh Whitman. Some said he went insane after losing his family to disease. Others said he simply got tired of pretending to care for people who never cared back. When Essie reached his cabin, she was drenched in sweat and dirt. The place was smaller than she imagined, but sturdy, built from pine logs with a stone chimney that still smoked faintly. The man who opened the door looked like a statue carved from the mountain itself, tall, weathered, and watchful. His beard was streaked with gray, and his eyes were sharp as winter ice. Please, she whispered, clutching her shawl to her chest. I'm sick. I need help. He studied her silently, his gaze clinical, not cruel. You're hiding something, he said finally. Tears welled in her eyes. Everyone thinks it's contagious. They won't come near me. I'm not everyone, he replied. I'm a doctor. His tone left no room for argument, yet his voice softened just slightly when he saw her trembling. If I'm to help you, I need to see the extent of the illness. Show me your body. The words made her flinch. Her instinct was to run, but her body wouldn't let her. She sank to her knees, sobbing. You'll be disgusted. Everyone is. He sighed deeply, setting aside the lantern he held. I've seen soldiers torn in half, child. You're not going to scare me. The old pain in his voice made her look up. For the first time, she saw the faint tremor in his hands, the exhaustion of someone who'd carried too many ghosts. Finally, she nodded. All right, she whispered, but please, don't look at me like they do. He met her eyes, steady and unflinching. I'll look at you as a patient, nothing more, nothing less. And for the first time in years, Essie felt a sliver of hope pierce through her fear. Josh Whitman led Essie inside without another word. The cabin was sparse, but orderly. Shelves stacked with jars of dried herbs, a large oak table covered in medical instruments polished to a dull shine, and a roaring fire that filled the space with the scent of pine resin and smoke. It didn't feel like a hermit's den. It felt like the echo of a field hospital, where discipline had replaced chaos. Sit by the fire, he said, pointing to a sturdy chair. You're shivering. Essie hesitated, still clutching her shawl, her heart thudding. I'm fine. He gave her a look that silenced protest. You've walked miles up a mountain with a fever. You're not fine. When she finally sat, he poured her a mug of hot water steeped with willow bark. For the pain, he murmured. Then quietly, now, let me see. Her hand shook as she began unbuttoning her sleeves. The room seemed to grow still, the only sound the crackle of firewood. When the fabric slipped down, patches of inflamed skin appeared, angry red and scaly, spreading across her forearms. Josh didn't flinch. He stepped closer, his brow furrowing in concentration. Arms, neck, shoulders. Does it spread farther? Essie's throat tightened. Everywhere, she whispered, even places I can't reach. His tone softened, professional, yet kind. Then I'll need to see those too, but only what's necessary for diagnosis. You'll stay covered otherwise. Understood? She nodded, tears pooling in her eyes. No man had ever spoken to her that way, firmly, but without shame. When he finished his examination, he stepped back and exhaled. It's not contagious, he said, and it's not your fault. Essie looked up, startled. Not my fault? He nodded. Chronic dermatitis, brought on by poor diet, stress, and constant irritation. Your body's rebelling against how you've been treated. That's all. She stared at him as if he'd spoken a foreign language. For years, people had told her it was punishment, God's wrath for gluttony, laziness, sin. Now, for the first time, someone offered a different explanation, one that didn't condemn but healed. Josh mixed herbs with practiced precision, his hand steady as he ground them into a paste. I'll make a salve from comfrey chamomile and lard. You'll apply it twice a day, and you'll eat what I cook. None of that salted pork and cornbread nonsense. Essie smiled weakly. You'll feed me? He arched a brow. I don't intend to starve my patients. Later that evening, as rain began to patter on the roof, Essie watched him work. He moved with quiet purpose, measuring, stirring, muttering to himself in low Latin phrases she didn't understand. Occasionally, his gaze flicked toward her, not out of curiosity, but to make sure she was all right. When he finally handed her a jar of the pale green salve, she hesitated. "Will it hurt?" "It'll sting at first," he said, "but healing always does." She nodded, her fingers trembling as she dabbed the ointment on her forearm. It did sting, but then came a cool relief, a softening she hadn't felt in months. Her eyes widened in surprise. Josh watched quietly, then turned back to the fire. "Stay the night. The trail's too dangerous in the dark." Essie's voice was small. "I don't want to trouble you." "You already are," he said dryly, "but you might as well do it safely." A reluctant smile tugged at her lips. "You're not very good at being kind." He looked over his shoulder, a ghost of amusement in his eyes. "I'm better than I used to be." That night, as the storm rolled over Copper Mountain, Essie lay awake on the small cot he'd made for her by the hearth. The firelight flickered against the walls, and above the steady rhythm of rain, she could hear Josh moving quietly in the next room. For the first time in years, she didn't feel repulsive. She felt human. And though she didn't know it yet, that simple feeling, the return of her own humanity, was the first step in a healing far deeper than skin. Morning light filtered through the cracks in the wooden shutters, painting thin gold lines across the cabin walls. The storm had passed, leaving the world outside fresh and still. Inside, the air smelled of pine smoke and soap. Essie stirred beneath the quilt, momentarily disoriented. Then she saw the neatly folded towels, a cup of warm water beside the bed, and a note written in neat, disciplined handwriting. "Wash before breakfast. Fresh clothes on the chair. Don't skip the salve." She smiled faintly. No one had ever left her a note that kind. When she limped into the kitchen, Josh was already there, sleeves rolled, stirring a pot of oatmeal with methodical precision. "You're late," he said without looking up. "You didn't tell me breakfast came with rules," she replied, easing herself into a chair. He glanced at her, the corner of his mouth twitching. "Everything worth doing does." It became their quiet routine. He cooked, she cleaned, he chopped herbs, she organized his medical jars. Though he spoke little, she found comfort in his silence. It wasn't cruel like the world's, but calm, deliberate, safe. Every morning he checked her skin, his touch gentle, professional. Yet each time, Essie's heart thudded louder. She tried to distract herself by asking questions. "Why live up here, doctor?" He paused, tying a bandage back in place. "Because people in town stopped needing me. Or maybe I stopped needing them." "Because of your family?" He froze for a heartbeat. Then quietly, "Because of the noise after they were gone." She didn't press. Instead, she offered him the same quiet he had given her. Over the weeks, the cabin began to hum with small, human sounds again, the scrape of dishes, the thud of firewood, the low murmur of conversation after supper. Essie learned to brew his herbal teas and to identify the plants he gathered, comfrey for healing, calendula for skin, valerian for sleep. One afternoon, while she stirred a pot of salve, she caught him watching her. "What?" she asked. He shook his head. "You're doing it wrong." She frowned. "I've followed your instructions exactly." He stepped behind her, reaching for her hands. His larger, calloused fingers guided hers over the pestle. "You're bruising the petals. You grind them too fast." His breath brushed the back of her neck. Her heartbeat tripped. "Like this," he murmured, slow, gentle. You let the plant give what it wants, not force it. She swallowed hard, focusing on the rhythm he set. For a moment, the cabin was so quiet she could hear only the scrape of stone and the rush of her own pulse. When he finally stepped away, she whispered, "You sound like you're talking about people." "Maybe I am," he said. In the evenings, they sat by the hearth, Essie mending torn shirts while Josh read old medical journals by lamplight. Sometimes he read aloud, Latin names, old remedies, and she would listen, half understanding, half entranced by the steady cadence of his voice. "You sound different when you talk about healing," she told him once, "almost like it still matters to you." He looked up from the page. "It always mattered. I just forgot why." Days blurred into one another, slow and peaceful. Her skin began to heal in earnest, the angry red fading to pale pink, the constant itch softening into warmth. But it wasn't just her body that was changing. She laughed more easily, moved more freely. She no longer flinched when she caught her reflection in the window. One morning, she stepped outside without her gloves. The sunlight touched her bare arms for the first time in years. Josh came to stand beside her, holding his mug of coffee. "You'll burn," he said, but his tone was softer than his words. "I'd rather burn than hide," she answered, eyes fixed on the mountains. He studied her quietly. "You're braver than most people I've treated." "Bravery isn't my choice," she said. "It's survival." That night, when she brought him supper, he reached out to take the bowl but didn't let go immediately. His thumb brushed against her wrist, lingering for just a breath. "Your skin," he said quietly, "is healing beautifully." Essie looked down, her cheeks warm. "It's the medicine." His gaze didn't waver. "No, it's the woman who finally believed she was worth saving." The air between them thickened, not with desire, but with something far deeper, understanding. And for the first time since she'd met him, Josh smiled fully, the kind that reached his tired blue eyes. "You can stop calling me doctor," he said. "It's just Josh." She smiled back. "Then it's just Essie." Outside, the wind sighed through the pines, carrying away the last echoes of winter. Inside, the mountain man and the woman the world had shamed were learning, day by day, what it meant to begin again. By the time summer settled across Copper Mountain, the cabin had become more than a refuge. It was a small world of rhythm and quiet understanding, but peace on a frontier never lasted long. One afternoon, a rider from Timber Creek reached the clearing. He was a ranch hand, red-faced and sweating, with gossip sharp as barbed wire. "Doc Whitman," he called from the gate. "Sheriff's looking for you. Says you're harboring a sick woman. Could be typhus, maybe worse." Josh's jaw tightened. "Tell him to mind his own medicine." When the man left, Essie stood in the doorway, pale. "They think I'm dangerous again." He turned to her, the old soldier's calm sliding over his features. "They think what they're told to think, but we'll handle it." Still, the word spread faster than wildfire. By week's end, 2 deputies and the town's preacher rode up the ridge demanding to see the infected girl. Essie watched from the window as Josh faced them, coat unbuttoned, hands empty, but steady. "She's not contagious," he said evenly. "I've treated her myself." The preacher's voice rose. "A woman like that is a punishment from God. You defy him by keeping her here." Josh's reply was quiet. "Dangerous. God's not the one at your shoulder, Reverend. Fear is." They rode off, muttering threats about quarantine and sin. When the hoofbeats faded, Josh came inside, shoulders heavy. Essie tried to sound brave. "They'll come back, won't they?" "Maybe," he said. "People hate what they can't explain." Then, more gently, "You're not leaving." But that night, as the fire dwindled, Essie couldn't sleep. The thought of bringing ruin to the only man who'd shown her kindness gnawed at her. Near dawn, she packed her few belongings, meaning to slip away before he woke. She didn't get far. The cabin door creaked, and his voice came from the shadows. "Running won't heal what they did to you." She froze. "They'll destroy you because of me." He stepped closer, the early light catching the silver in his beard. "Let them try. I buried worse things in the war." Her eyes filled. "You don't understand, Josh. All my life I've been something to hide. I can't let you pay that price." He took her hands, scarred, trembling, still warm from the salve she'd made the night before. "You think saving you is a price? It's the first good thing I've done in 10 years. The weight of his words broke her resolve. She dropped her bag and sobbed into his chest, and for the first time he didn't hold back. His arms came around her, solid, protective, real. After that morning, they prepared for the worst. Josh taught her how to load the small rifle above the hearth, how to treat wounds quickly if trouble came. Yet, in those tense days, the bond between them only deepened. One evening, while they reinforced the shutters, Essie asked quietly, "Did you ever think you'd be fighting for someone again?" He gave a half-smile. "Did you ever think someone would fight for you?" The answer sat unspoken between them, thick as the scent of pine and smoke. A week later, the sheriff finally came, 4 men armed and certain of righteousness. They demanded Josh hand Essie over for examination in town. "If she's clean, she'll return," the sheriff promised. "If not, well, the mountains are full of graves." Josh's shotgun stayed leveled, his voice calm but unyielding. "You want her, you'll have to step through me." Essie stepped forward, then shaking, but steady. "And me." Her voice, clear, defiant, stopped even the sheriff for a heartbeat. She lifted her bare arm, the skin smooth and pale in the sunlight. "Does this look like sickness to you? Or are you just afraid of what doesn't fit your sermons?" No one spoke. Finally, the sheriff muttered, "You've both lost your minds," and turned his horse downhill. The others followed. When they were gone, Essie sagged against the porch rail, laughter and tears mixing on her face. Josh set his gun aside, eyes soft with pride. "Seems the patient cured more than herself today," he said. For several days after the sheriff's visit, the mountain stayed quiet. The valley below shimmered with summer heat, and the only sounds were the buzz of cicadas and the rhythmic chop of Josh's axe. But both of them felt the weight of what had passed. The line between their quiet life and the world's cruelty had been drawn. One afternoon, while Essie gathered herbs by the creek, she heard the distant echo of horses again. Her pulse quickened. Josh appeared at the cabin door, rifle in hand, his expression grim. "They're back," he said. But it wasn't the sheriff this time. It was a crowd of townsfolk, a dozen men and women, led by Reverend Hale himself. They carried torches and a wooden cross. "We've come to burn out the disease," someone shouted. Essie froze. Josh stepped in front of her. "Turn around," he called out, his voice carrying across the clearing. "She's healed. You're not welcome here." The preacher sneered. "You think you can play God, Whitman? She fooled you, same way the devil fools men with pity." Josh's eyes hardened. "You came to destroy what you don't understand, but you'll leave knowing what mercy looks like." He raised his rifle, but didn't aim to kill, just to warn. A shot cracked into the air, scattering a few crows from the trees. The townsfolk flinched. The echo rolled like thunder. "Go home," Essie cried, stepping beside him. Her voice shook, but she stood tall. "Look at me. Do I look cursed? Or just inconvenient?" Her sleeves were rolled up, her skin smooth, sunlit, alive. The sight silenced them more than the gun. The preacher's face twisted. "Even if you're clean, you've sinned, living here with him." Josh's voice was quiet, firm. "You're right. I've sinned plenty, but loving someone isn't one of them." The words hung in the mountain air, heavy and final. For a long moment, no one moved. Then one of the women, a washerwoman from town, lowered her torch. "She doesn't look sick," she murmured. "She looks happy." One by one, others followed, dropping their torches into the dirt until the preacher stood alone, fury burning in his eyes. But even he couldn't fight what he saw, the unmistakable proof of healing that no sermon could deny. When they left, the clearing fell silent again. Smoke from the torches drifted upward, thin and harmless. Essie turned to Josh, tears blurring her vision. "You didn't have to stand against all of them." He set down the rifle. "Yes, I did." His voice softened. "Because somewhere between their hatred and your courage, I remembered why I became a doctor." She stepped closer, trembling. "And what was that?" He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his fingers tracing the curve of her newly healed skin. "To save what's still good in this world." The fire in his eyes wasn't anger now, it was love, raw and unspoken. And as the sun slipped behind Copper Mountain, Essie knew they had both won something the world could never burn away. The following weeks passed in a kind of golden quiet that neither of them had ever known. The mountain, once a fortress of exile, had turned into home. Wild flowers spread along the ridge, and each morning the scent of pine and soaproot drifted through the cabin windows. Essie no longer hid her arms or neck. Her skin had healed, pale and smooth beneath the sun, but what truly shone was the light in her eyes, calm, certain, free. She had learned to grind herbs beside Josh's work table, to tie bandages, to brew the bitter teas that eased the pain of those few travelers brave enough to find their way up the mountain. One evening, as the sun sank behind the peaks, she stood on the porch with him. The valley below glowed bronze, the air humming with crickets. Josh leaned against the rail, quiet, watching the light fade. "You ever think about going back to town?" she asked softly. He smiled faintly. "Used to think about it every day. Now I can't imagine leaving." She turned toward him. "Because of me?" He nodded once. "Because with you here, it finally feels like living instead of hiding." For a long moment they just stood there, the former outcast and the haunted doctor, listening to the mountain breathe. The years ahead would still be hard. The world below would not forget easily. But the fear had lost its teeth. Josh reached for her hand, rough and warm. "You're safe here, Essie." She smiled through quiet tears. "It's home, isn't it?" He squeezed her hand gently. "If you'll have it." Essie looked toward the darkening valley and whispered, "I already do." And as night settled over Copper Mountain, their small cabin glowed like a lantern, two healed hearts keeping the cold at bay. Stories like this remind us that healing isn't always found in medicine or miracles, but in kindness, in the quiet moments when someone finally looks at you and doesn't turn away. Essie's scars faded, but what truly healed her was being seen, believed, and loved without judgment. And Josh, the man who'd lost all faith in people, rediscovered it through her courage. Maybe that's what real salvation looks like. Two broken souls learning to breathe again together. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? If you still believe in second chances, don't scroll away. The next story is waiting for you.